Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 1972 TV movie Moon of the Wolf, starring David Janssen, or Janssen, I'm not sure how you pronounce his surname, best known for being in The Fugitive, the 60s TV show that got turned into a Harrison Ford movie in the 90s, I'm guessing. So in this, Janssen plays a Louisiana sheriff who is investigating a young woman's murder. And in the course of this, he has to deal with the hot-headed antics of the murdered woman's brother, the ravings of her bedridden father, and the fact that his killer demonstrates the ability to rip iron bars out of a brick wall. Now, you and I can probably guess the true nature of the killer from the title of the movie, but the sheriff, of course, doesn't have that context. And so he is not aware that he is up against a werewolf. Now, there have been a few efforts over the years to make werewolf TV movies, TV shows, with varying degrees of success. This one's actually not bad, though the TV budget definitely hurts the effects. Let's talk a little bit more in detail about what's notable about this movie, starting with another movie entirely, The Night Stalker, which is also a TV movie. It aired about 9 months before this film did. And it was about an investigative reporter named Carl Kolchak, who comes to realise that the serial killer he's been reporting on is actually a vampire. And the reason that The Night Stalker is significant to this film, I believe, is that The Night Stalker garnered what were then, well, this has been exceeded since, but were then the highest ratings of any TV film ever, generating a sequel movie in 1973 and a TV series in 1974. I'll complain about the latter in some future video. The relevance of this, The Night Stalker today to this movie is that while I have no direct evidence of it, the timing of this werewolf movie seems a bit less than coincidental to me. You have a massively successful vampire movie in January 1972, and then late September 1972 this film comes out. I smell a supernatural fish, shall we say. I think there's probably a connection. But, having established that, now we need to talk about whether the movie is any good and what it does. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is tension versus mystery, because this is not a movie with mystery to it. The identity of the werewolf is pretty obvious. At least to the audience. I mean, in universe you can kind of see why maybe they don't get it immediately. But from the perspective of the audience, there's really only one person it can be. But that is not actually a flaw in this film, to my feeling. At least I don't feel it is. Because ultimately, the mystery of who the killer is not the tension of the film. The tension of the film is what the killer is, how the protagonist will find out, and what will happen when the killer is exposed and the nature of the killer is exposed. That tension is actually played out pretty well. And that is the tension of the movie. That is what gives the movie its sense of drama and thrill, rather than, it's not an Agatha Christie whodunit. It's a how will they work out what done it and what will happen when they confront the werewolf. Now, some of that tension that the film has built up is lost when the werewolf finally appears on screen, because the monster makeup is not good and actively detracts from the reveal. But the script does a solid job of keeping me engaged up until that point. So, props to them for recognising where the tension of this movie was and going for that, rather than trying to create a mystery about who it is. The characters have a mystery about who it is. It's pretty obvious to the audience from the get-go, I feel. Now, something else that the movie does is that the lead is not the protagonist. And what I mean by this is that the sheriff, himself, who is, our sort of, our big-name, manly man actor, starring in the film, the sheriff refuses to buy into the whole werewolf idea, even when he finally has it explained to him by somebody, and he consequently doesn't really feature in the climax of the movie. It's his sort of maybe love interest who confronts the werewolf at the end of the movie. Now, I'd normally complain about something like this. Don't make the central character of your movie not the protagonist. It's kind of like 101 stuff, But I do think that the film would be better if the love interest had been kind of positioned as our point of view character all along. But this is one time where I felt that, like, the switch of protagonist, or the reveal that, hey, the sheriff isn't actually the person who resolves this. It's not actually the protagonist. The surprise protagonist, if you like, works quite well in this movie. I wasn't sitting there railing at the movie like I normally would over this, which means that they did it quite well, really. And the fact, that it wasn't the manly man main actor who saved the day probably factors into my positive response. Like, I like that at the end of the day, it's his female maybe love interest who saves the day. Because spoiler, they do defeat the werewolf. I like, I thought that this is one of those cases where that switch actually worked, and it frequently doesn't. So that's Moon of the Wolf. It's in the public domain, so it's easy to find on places like archive.org or in bargain basement DVD sets, which is where I got it. And it's a harmless way to spend an hour and a half. It's not the effects are bad. Warning, disclaimer. Let's be clear. But yeah, that's Moon of the Wolf. Next time, what am I going to talk about? Well, we've talked about werewolves, so why not talk about vampires, specifically Blood, the Last Vampire, a 2009 live-action film based on a Japanese anime. So we'll be talking about that next time. In the meantime, hope you enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching.